Hello, audiophiles. This is Fernando from SkyFi Audio in Glen Rock, New Jersey. Today I'm going to go over a system that I've put together from pieces in our shop. I've taken a few years to assemble this particular system. It is from Nakamichi, and it is the complete 7 series. A set of pieces that was released in the late 80s from Nakamichi, and this was their golden era. This was when they were making the neatest, most innovative, and in my opinion, best looking gear of their long history. So the 7 series was above the 5, and it featured a total of 5 components, and I've got them all here. So here at SkyFi Audio, equipment comes and goes over time, and once in a while I'll start pulling pieces to try to assemble the essential greatest hits from that brand, from that era, and that's what I've managed to do here. Now I've thrown something in to the mix which is a little bit more rare and not technically part of the 7 series, which is this Nakamichi Dragon computing turntable, but I thought it would be a fitting sort of icing on the cake for this assembly to have the Nakamichi Dragon turntable, because it's really the only turntable that they made, and in par with the rest of this series. So in this video, I'm gonna go over the individual components, tell you what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and what to look for when sourcing vintage equipment of this caliber. All right, so and this is a good time to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video or think you might be enjoying it, and maybe you've watched other ones from the past. So I'd love it if you could subscribe to the channel, give us some thumbs up to stay motivated to bring you these videos. All right, so let me dive right in. So the 5 components of the 7 series include the PA7 amplifier. Here's the name tag on it. There's a 200 plus 200 watt power amplifier. And then from the top to the bottom, we've got the ST7 AM/FM tuner. Now, people have been complaining that I don't hold the camera steady enough, so I'm really working on that, and I'm going to be mindful of that during this video, hopefully. Just below it is the OMS-7AII Compact Disc Player. All right, below that is the CR7A Cassette Deck. This is absolutely one of my favorites from Nakamichi. And then below that is their Control Amplifier, the CA7A Control Amplifier. Okay, and the Nakamichi Dragon turntable. All right, so let me tell you a bit about it. So as you guys probably know, Nakamichi, a Japanese brand, imported to the United States tons of equipment during the 80s and 90s, eventually right before its demise. I think it was probably in the late 90s, if not. Once the tape deck sort of fell out of grace, which was really their forte, the brand started to sort of decline, and I don't think it's around anymore. Starting with the amplifier, this is a great amplifier and really desirable for people even that are not into the Nakamichi system thing, and mostly because it's a Nelson Pass design. This Stasis technology, which is essentially the circuit topology, is what brings this amplifier its notoriety, and it did in fact come from the engineering brain of Nelson Pass. It's essentially a no negative feedback design. It's fully single-ended, so it's simple in execution. And it's pretty powerful for its age. So 1988, 200 watts was quite a bit of power. This particular amplifier was capable of delivering, on the bench more like 235 watts into 8 ohms. And it could double its power into half the load into 4 ohms, and then go up to 650 watts for 2 ohms, which is pretty staggering. Not uncommon that the power would go up so much with a change of impedance, but really well executed amplifier and great sonic signature. I've used these in my personal system for many years. I had 2 of these at one point powering some Teal speakers, and I really dug it. Another notable thing, it's massively built. Look at these heat sinks here. Weighs in at about 65 pounds or 65 pounds, and has a 700 volt ampere toroidal transformer and 132 microfarads of capacitance. So back in the day, people liked this amplifier because its ability to deliver that much power stably into, not stably, that's not a word, its ability to deliver stable 600 watts into 2 ohms. So people love these amplifiers for driving difficult loads like electrostatic speakers. And if you go through the old magazine articles, you'll see a lot about that. So another notable thing is its casework. It's absolutely beautifully built. It's all aluminum. This is not a sheet metal. This is an actual aluminum top. Obviously the heat sinks are aluminum, but the handles are so Nakamichi and so late 80s that it just looks the part. It's got a single power button, which follows their design language and everything they've made from that period. It's got these 2 little embedded LEDs here and a very nice brush finish with a slight separation here or a demarcation on the 4 faceplate. Allen head screws throughout, and later on I'll swing to the back and show you what that looks like. The handles allow you to kind of move it around, which is in fact difficult to do. And it has little resting feet in the back, which lets you sort of stand it up on its back. And I truly appreciate that. We move stuff around the shop all the time, and amplifier designs that allow you to move it around without scratching and dented is really a big plus. The only drawback is that it does have a bunch of sharp corners. So just last weekend I was pulling this out. I nicked my finger with it, and I think it bled for 2 days. So you got to be careful on these vintage amplifiers with sharp corners. Just below the PA7 is the PA5, which is a 100-watt version of this. Very similar design and execution. Obviously not as good as the PA7 or as desirable, but if you don't have the budget for the 7, PA5 has a very similar sound characteristics. So it'd be a nice alternative if you're looking to put together a starter system. Let's move on from there. I'm going to talk about the tuner. Not much to talk about in terms of the tuner. It's obviously quartz locked. AM/FM tuner. It's got 16 presets on it. It's a fair performer on the bench. I've had it tested here, and it performed average. Nothing really stellar about it. Construction's a bit cheap, but if you want a Nakamichi tuner to match the 7, this was the only thing available at the time. All right, the OMS-7AII is actually a good CD player. A couple notable design features: the way they've mounted the eject onto the drawer. It's kind of cool. It's got a big, thick, clunky drawer. Very 80s as well. And it's pretty reliable. It's done well over the years. I see some, about maybe 25% that arrive don't work, but 75% of them do, which is a pretty high batting average for a CD player from the late 80s. Nothing else very notable about it other than its sort of design language. And then moving down below to the CR7A. Now that is, the CR7A is a very good tape deck. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. The heat had turned on, which is quite loud, so just ran over and turned on the thermostat. So CR7A, one of my favorite cassette decks. Yes, the Dragon is better known, bigger following, but the CR7 technically speaking is just as good as the Dragon, if not better, and a fitting match to this. I did notice that the Dragon is a little bit wider than this CR7, so if you're into the whole aesthetic package and presentation, a Dragon looks a little bit out of place on this particular stack of components from the 7 series. But in terms of the technical performance, it's quite capable. It is in fact a direct drive cassette deck. It is 3 heads, capable of Dolby B and C, dual cap stands, and my favorite feature on here, the manual playback azimuth control. This is quite a feat, and a very desirable feature on the CR7. And people in the pro audio world, let's say you're into transferring tapes or restoring audio tapes, anything like that, or maybe a recording studio that needs to be able to play back some vintage formats, this manual playback azimuth is going to be a must. So that's why people choose the 7 over the Dragon at times. So as I mentioned, manual azimuth. It's got a real-time counter, which is really cool. This counter actually measures time, not some fictitious advancement in tape like your typical counters do. Besides that, it does have it does suffer from some motor issues. The motors that were used in these decks weren't very good, and almost all of them have failed. But if you're lucky to find one where the motor's been serviced, they're fairly reliable beyond that. Like most tape decks, they'll need a service every 10 years for the consumables, the rubber belts, rollers, wheels, and all that stuff will need to get replaced over time. It does have auto calibration as well, which is a neat thing, and the ability to do a lot of this from a remote, which is pretty cool. You can sit at your armchair and play around with the settings for calibration, tape selection, etc. It's simpler in design, a lot less buttons than the Dragon, and a little less intimidating. But I do have other videos on this channel that goes over the CR7. All right, down to my favorite piece from the 7, which is the CA7A Pre-amplifier. So this is a full function, all analog pre-amplifier, capable of many inputs here. As you can see, there's 2 tape inputs, 2 auxiliaries, a tuner, CD, and the Phono. And the Phono is quite capable of both moving magnet, moving coil, settings for capacitance and gain, and pretty much everything you'd want in a Phono preamp, which is pretty nice. Right about the 90s is when they stopped including Phono preamps or Phono sections in preamps, which is a real bummer. So a lot of the good preamps from the 1990s, you have to go to an outboard Phono preamp, which is really annoying. I like a nice Phono section built into it when possible. The other thing you'll notice is that the casework for this particular unit is quite superior than it is for these 3 others. So on the tape deck, on the CD player, and on the tuner, the chassis work is all stamped, steel, bent and stamped steel. On the 7 preamp, if I can give you a peek here at the corner of it, is a nice solid, or at least extruded aluminum chassis, which is quite a step up from the rest of them. And a nice thing, I like things come in a nice chassis. It shows attention to detail and quality. And I'm not a fan of these sort of plastic, plates and stamped steel covers. So kudos for Nakamichi for doing that. And I imagine they did it because it was likely to be sold in conjunction with the PA7. CA7, PA7 were sort of like a match made in heaven. So because it did such nice casework on the 7, it made sense that the preamp got the same level as well. So a little bit of some facts around the CA7. Quite a bit of isolation, internal mechanical isolation. I've seen the inside of this. It's beautifully built. It's got a bunch of sections separated for interference. It uses a bunch of power supply sections, photocouplers for isolation, and shielding throughout the machine. Essentially, there are some digital functions within it for control and logic and all that, and that is completely separated from the audio section, which is important to keep interference and noise down. Another neat fact about this is that the 7 has a remote control, and that remote control is capable of controlling a bunch of other stuff from Nakamichi, which is not uncommon for a brand, but it actually can control older stuff. Like it can control a Dragon tape deck, it can control a 1000 ZXL, a ZX9, and LX9. So if you're lucky enough to have a CA7 with a remote control, which is pretty rare, you'll love the fact you can control other vintage pieces from Nakamichi. All right, moving on to the coolest thing here, the Dragon CT Computing Turntable. This is one of 2. I know I mentioned earlier that it was maybe the only Nakamichi Dragon, but if I said that, as I think about it now, there was another one that was even more complicated than this one, that had more functions. Now, the claim to fame on this particular design is that it has an automatic record centering technology. So, you know, Nakamichi believed that one of the limiting factors in performance of a turntable was that a record, the hole in the record was never cut precisely where it needed to be. That through the manufacturing process, there wasn't enough attention paid to it, and if you were to measure the distance between the center and the beginning groove, or the center and the opposite side, that there'd be a difference, so that the hole wasn't really precisely cut. So what did they do? Well, they came up with this crazy design and execution where this turntable measures, you know, mechanically measures, I believe they measure this last groove here in the middle with this tone arm here. So this arm comes out, plops down, measures the center of the record, mechanically stops, and much like a tire balancing piece of equipment, it advances to the correct spot, and then this little finger pushes out and centers the record. And how does it do that? Well, it's sitting on a glass platter. Let's see if I can show you that. So if I lift this mat, you can kind of see that that is in fact a glass platter. And that glass platter can float within the turntable. If I move it, see if you can see this. I can actually, there's about 1/8 of an inch of play. So this little finger pushes out and indexes essentially and perfectly centers the platter within the plinth. So pretty neat. I'm not quite sure how important that is. I like it for what it is, which is a really cool 1980s vintage turntable. It's really neat. Look at the large feet on the sides and the perforated steel, the control panel, which I love. It's got a very reasonable, well-performing tone arm. And I can show you some of that functionality. Let's see, if you press start, you can see the arm come out, drops in, finds the last groove, and then it'll lift up. So right now it's sitting there measuring the center groove. And it is in fact going through the center search function, as you can see here. Sorry for the glare, there's quite a bit of it there. All right, and then you can cancel that out. So if it went through the cycle, you'd see it stop, index, measure again until it finds the true center. Other than that, it's a pretty basic manual turntable. The start of the mode and the stop is automatic, but the rest of the functions within the arm are manual. There is in fact a cueing button to lift and lower the arm, and it does know the end of the record, so it'll sense and then essentially lift and stop. So some turntable is not set up, so that's why it's not acting like it should. It's not even on level ground at this point. But this is it, the Nakamichi Dragon computing turntable. Let's see, I always forget to play something, but I've got this set up playing through these Vandersteen 3 signature speakers. I've got the output going to the CR7, so you can kind of see the lights moving. All right, I did promise a look at the back of this equipment, so let me swing back there and see what I can show you. On the Dragon, there's not much to it, just the outputs plus the grounding tab, captive power cord. The tuner is pretty standard. It's got the system remote port that I was telling you about. That all ties back to the preamp, a set of outputs, and all the antenna selections you'd need. CD player, also pretty standard, just a line output plus a remote port. Captive power cord as well. CR7 tape deck, line in, line out, an azimuth control, and the transport control. The preamps are more complicated. Here you see the phono section. It's got a piece of plastic with some instructions, but we've got gain settings here to go with between, I think, 36, 24, and minus 20 for the moving coil. Here's the moving magnet, the capacitance for the moving magnet. It's got 3 settings for that. Here's the selection between moving coil and moving magnet. And the same thing for the other channel. So it's left and right, and the grounding tab. All right, all the corresponding inputs and outputs, including the double tape loops. 2 sets of outputs in case you've got 2 sets of amplifiers. That's a real nice feature on there. And then lastly, all the system remote outputs, so you can control other pieces. It's got a removable power cord, which is nice, unlike the rest of the series. Now looking at the PA7, very simple. The feed I was telling you about for standing the unit up, single set of single-ended inputs, and conventional, looks like 2 weight binding posts. A little bit older than what we're used to. So that's it. That covers it. Thanks for staying with me, if you have. And visit us online at skyfiaudio.com. You'll see some of this equipment. I believe this CR7 listed, this Nakamichi Dragon's listed, but you'll see a ton of other cool equipment. I mean, we've got probably 600 pieces in stock right now. So skyfiaudio.com is our website. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. And let me know what you think. Did I do a better job holding the camera? Did I skip over anything important? Did I not play enough music? I know that's usually the case. But thanks for watching. Please leave the comments below, and stay tuned for more.